Hi, it's Sherry at Savvy Business Resolutions with the penultimate episode of this series of Investing in Conversation, Conflict Management for Managers. Over the next two shows, I want to look at a couple of things that pull all the other topics together that we've discussed across the series. So this time, I'm busting a myth, speaking from experience, and giving you a tip about a subject which is talked about and written about, and it's everywhere you look, but it still divides people. So we come to this week's myth. Emotional intelligence is just about being nice to everyone. We were talking about a key element of emotional intelligence in episode 5, empathy. If you caught that programme, you will have heard Dr. Graham Music of the Tavistock Centre. But in case you didn't,
I think you have to understand what somebody else is thinking and feeling, particularly feeling, and you have to be able to feel with them to an extent. So it's feeding into their state of mind of being to an extent, which is a different kind of understanding from understanding it cognitively. If I'm a manager, I'll be much more successful if I'm empathic as well as a boundary and strong boss, as it were.
There's a widespread belief that any kind of intelligence is something you're either born with or you're not. But as Graham explains, experience can turn innate abilities either on or off.
If you have parents when you're very little, from infancy in the first couple of years, who are very, not just loving and caring, but really try to work out what you're thinking and feeling, and also make you feel safe, that the world is a safe place, then you're far more likely to become empathic.
Right.
And in a sense, you are learning it from your own personal experience of being empathised with. We've evolved to develop capacity for empathy and to use it when the situation warrants it, when things feel safe and we feel amongst people we're interested in and care about. When the world feels scary and dangerous and there's lots of violence and massive unpredictability, maybe empathy isn't such a useful trait. Maybe you need to be much more reactive and suspicious and aggressive and competitive, for example. And so you need empathy less in those situations. So we're a very adaptive species. And although empathy is, I think, is the most extraordinary capacity, and I think at the heart of some of the best in human nature, it doesn't make any sense to be empathic in a very, very scary situation.
There are several models for assessing EI, or emotional intelligence, but I use Daniel Goleman's performance model. Goleman puts empathy fourth on his list of components, in between self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and social skills. The first two bust our myth straight away because they've got absolutely nothing to do with being nice to people. Self-awareness has come up on this series time and time again, especially in the tips. Because obviously, you can't consciously manage something that you're not consciously aware of, can you? In this context, self-awareness isn't just about being able to name what you're feeling. That's the first step. Then you need to be able to spot a link between that and how you behave. And finally, you need to be able to weigh up your options for changing any negative cycles or promoting positive ones. Armed with that insight, you can move on to self-regulation. Now, this is not about squashing feelings down. Just the opposite. Our emotions come from much older parts of our brains in evolutionary terms than our logical thoughts. So we can't really control them. What we can control is how we read and respond to them. I'll give you an example. I used to describe my temper as very long fuse, very big bang. Everything that irritated, upset, annoyed me, whatever, all got pushed down into this kind of emotional compost heap. And unfortunately, because there was no ventilation, it tended to overheat. So you'd end up with this very combustible mixture, and then the most trivial little spark would set the lot off. It would go off, bang, big explosion, very, very messy. These days, of course, I still get cross, but the worst that's likely to happen is a controlled explosion. Most of the time, I can see the signs, see the steam rising, if you like, and I can deal with it without the need for sandbags, which is very good for me and even better for everybody that I work with. Moving on to motivation, We tend to link that with inspiration, don't we? Of course, that's important, especially for a leader. But at a more basic level, it's just about what moves our behaviour, and that includes our fundamental needs. So much conflict comes out of misunderstandings around needs, which is why I'm talking about it on the blog this week. Last, but definitely not least on Daniel Goleman's list, are social skills. Along with empathy, the popular perception of what this means helps to fuel our myth. But people with the best social skills are not nice all the time. Really, nice is not much of a compliment, is it? It's a bit ugh. We're talking here about everything you need to manage a successful relationship. So it includes influence, it includes persuasion, it includes being able to set and maintain boundaries, and you can't always do that if you're too nice. It also covers the ability to recognise and manage manipulation. To put that another way, the toolkit includes a carefully calibrated BS alarm. Whatever you call it, the skill set captured by the term emotional intelligence is absolutely essential to the relationships that our businesses rely on, because it helps us behave consistently and fairly, and even, it might sound a bit weird, more rationally. It helps us build trust, which I always think of as relational glue. However open-minded we are, emotions are a really personal topic, aren't they? So trying to get somebody to speak from experience about theirs, especially in a professional context, is a really tough call. Okay, I was talking a little bit earlier about getting rid of my emotional compost heap, and that was fine, but I wouldn't really want to start talking about how I built it, why I built it, or how I got rid of it. Over a bottle of wine one night, I might tell you, but not on the pod. That said, I am going to speak from experience. The experience of working for a boss who didn't have a high level of emotional intelligence and really could have done with it. Our first meeting was the job interview from hell, which I mentioned at the end of episode 5. If you didn't hear that show, it was a local law firm, and I walked in there with my guide dog and it completely threw the senior partner. She was all at sea.
Lady came in and I stood up, put out my hand to shake hands, as you do, and she missed.
No.
And then stood there and went, "Oh, I see, you want to shake hands. I thought you were groping."
What?
I've never groped in my life.
When I went to uni to study law, there was a roughly 50-50 split between men and women on the course, and the women outnumbered the men on some modules. But when my boss went into the profession 30, 40 years earlier, it was a completely different picture. Women were very much in the minority. As she told me later, we had to be strong to survive, but we had to be tough to thrive. When she set up her own practice, which I think was maybe late 60s, early 70s, she focused on bringing other women through in her own unique way, shall we say. By the time I joined her in 1990, she had an all-female team. But if you're imagining a lovely, caring group of ladies all working together in perfect harmony, forget it. This woman was as hard as nails and twice as sharp. She didn't suffer fools, gladly or otherwise. She was volatile, she was demanding, she was unpredictable, and she was quite often unfair. Motivation was 90% stick and 10% carrot if you were lucky. And feelings, well, that really was the F word. Some people thrived working for her, but others just tried to survive as long as they could. Because if you could stay the course, she did offer good career prospects. Although a lot of us couldn't stay the course, I was one of them. But even in the short time I worked for her, I saw several young women come and go. If my temper used to be very long fuse, very big bang, hers was very short fuse, very big bang. She used to blow up at someone at least once a day. And if you were in the firing line, you didn't argue. You just kept your head down and said, "Yes, Mary," a lot. and just waited for her to blow over or maybe start blowing in somebody else's direction. There's no question she was a very successful lawyer. Her clients had enormous respect for her. Although I did meet one or two people in later years who admitted they'd actually been as scared of her as I was. As one of her minions, as she called us, it was very much her way or the highway. And actually, it was when I told her I was going to hit the highway that I saw her human side. When I went to her office and told her I was leaving, I really thought she was going to throw me straight out. But what she actually did was she got up, she closed the door, and she asked me to sit down. Then she told me her story, and I saw her in a whole different light. I'm now roughly the age that she was when I worked for her. And I can see that if she had understood herself better and she had been able to regulate her rages a bit more and motivate us with something other than fear, her life and the lives of a lot of the girls who came and went could have been completely different. My tip off the back of that is it's never too late to invest in a conversation with yourself. Now, don't worry, I'm not suggesting that you sit down and have a nice cosy coffee with your reflection, not if there's a chance of anybody watching anyway. No, what I mean is, if you see a negative pattern in any of your working relationships, or if anybody has the courage to point it out to you, it's well worth taking the time to look at yourself and ask yourself whether there is something in your behaviour which is causing or aggravating an issue. If so, where does it come from and what can you do about it? That could quite easily pay financial dividends as well as the humankind. It really could boost your bottom line. I'll finish this time with a motivational misunderstanding which came out of, to use a technical term, a cross-cultural cock-up. I was told the story by somebody who was actually there. So what happened was, back in 2000, an American company took over a London business. The new bosses came in full of good intentions and enthusiasm. And I have to say, speaking as a Brit, there's nothing quite like American enthusiasm. Well, these guys brought it by the bucket load. They showered their new team with it. Their first plan was to improve the Londoners' work-related benefits, including giving them free health insurance. They thought that would get their new team eating out of their hands. So you can imagine they were completely confused when their brilliant gift went down like the proverbial lead balloon. The Americans were mystified. I mean, a US team would have given their right arms for that kind of perk. What the hell was going on? Well, what was going on was, while they were giving what they saw as this invaluable benefit with one hand, they took away several small benefits with the other. And one was free tea and coffee in the office. I mean, I don't think they nicked the kettle and the cups and so on to pay for the health benefits. That just doesn't make sense. But the coincidence was enough to cause conflict. The Americans had missed two key points. First, in the States, of course, free healthcare is a need to have. But in the UK, it's a nice to have because we've got the NHS. Okay, that might be changing. But in 2000, that was the perception. And the second point, perhaps the most important one, was who in their right mind comes between a Brit and their cup of tea? You touch our tea bags at your peril. All right, it's coffee for some of us, but the principle's the same. Hands off our caffeine. I don't know if there actually was a riot, but I know there were protests until the Americans saw the error of their ways and harmony and the kettle were restored. Speaking of which, that's it. I'm off for a coffee. At least working from home, I know nobody's going to touch it. So I will wish you a peaceful and productive week, and I will talk to you next time for the last time for a short while. If you need help with any aspect of conflict management at work, come and talk to me. All my details are on the website, savvybusinessresolutions.com.